live in a very mysterious world, filled with mystery of strange creatures and anomalies. The subjects we explain on tonight's shows are all filled with mystery and unknown. Come seek the answers as we go and explore these mysterious subjects. I'm your host, Chris Fringe.
I'm your co-host, Sensei, signing in from some dot off the grid. So let's take a trip to the dark side of the human mind, to a place where fact and fiction disappears and cryptid theories grace our ears.
And you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. Prepare yourselves as we dive into the madness of the mystery of our world. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to The Venomous Fringe, Cryptids and Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Fringe. Join me this evening as I'm sitting down with Charles Urban. You might remember Charles from over the summer, in which I had interviewed him about his paranormal encounter, as well as also discussing cryptid topics. Charles returns to the show this evening to discuss some paranormal phenomena happening in his home state, as well as also, too, we're going to be taking a look at some videos that are pretty interesting and have led to us to think, what is in them? Another thing I want to point out is that when I interviewed Charles, I had used a microphone that was dead and, as I like to call, pathetic. I'm using a brand new microphone. As you can probably hear, the quality is 10 times better. But folks, if you happen to hear the quality response and the feedback coming from this interview tonight, I do strongly apologize. At the time, I was still getting my new microphone coming in, so I had to settle to use the one that was, of course, destroyed and pathetic. Overall, though, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode, and I'll see you at the end of the broadcast. My guest at this time, you know him as Charles Urban. Charles has been on my show a couple of times discussing various cryptid topics. Now Charles comes back. This time we're talking something totally different. Charles, welcome back to the Venomous Fringe. It's great to have you back. How are you, my friend?
Good. Great to be back.
It's been a while since I've seen you, and more importantly, I hope you're staying bundled up and warm. It's pretty cold out there where you're at, my friend.
Yep, Great Lakes State. We are in the thick of it so far.
How's everything going snow-wise? Have you been able to get dug out, or are you still pretty
You know, we're used to it, so we've got like the slush in the streets, but it's just that negative. We're not quite negative numbers yet. Last year we were in the negative 20. Something like that. The true polar vortex.
That's the beauty of it. At least, you know what, though? I mean, the beauty of it, at least, is that you have, like, a fireplace, and you can, like, stay bundled up and warm. I would assume if you do.
Yeah, I just light a bunch of candles, and I gather around.
It's like in a Satanist cult meeting, I suppose. Summoning all the dogmen.
That's my only angle.
Well, hey man, you know what? Welcome back. Tonight we're talking some paranormal, and when I was speaking to you before we started doing the show, you know, you had brought up a couple of interesting things, and I'll be showcasing a lot of that work tonight through the slides. Paranormal, man. I mean, where do we even begin? I mean, paranormal phenomena for you, and what you've come and collected. What has been the update lately in your realm of research?
Lately, I've been really honing in on shadow people and the Hat Man and all the like in that realm. I mean, of course, I'm always up and up with the cryptid activity, but recently, the more I've been sinking my teeth into some classic Coast to Coast and Art Bell speak and all that, more and more the vintage shows on there, you find there's a lot of information about the Hat people, or rather, sorry, the Shadow people, and explicitly the Hat Man itself. And for those that don't know, the Shadow people has been lovingly declared as anything a black mass perception of a patch of a shadow as a living, breathing humanoid, or at least a moving one, and sometimes has been noted as having animalistic features or larger than life, extra long limbs or fingers or even horns in some cases. But the common thread among them is that it looks like a living shadow.
It's shadow people, man. It's something that is so widespread, not just in penitentiaries and small businesses. I mean, I've collected there and there some cases of people who have had seen shadow people in their homes. Some people seeing what are shadow people, but as you made mention, have animal-like features, and it's terrified them. People have moved away. Overall, shadow people, I mean, would you consider them to be the worst of the worst in terms of paranormal, or at least up there in worst to worst?
I would think it's the most variable. Definitely the most unique in that they come in all shapes and sizes, some as children, some as full grown adults, some as 6, 7 foot tall apparition type entities that just suddenly appear and disappear or reappear. And they do have very bizarre characteristics for something that seemingly wouldn't have anything at all, being a shadow.
Overall, I think shadow people have that paranormal ability, that strong vibe, a vibe that truly will take someone aback. And for you, you've been doing a lot of research lately. What have you been collecting in terms of this phenomena?
Well, I can tell you what I've heard about it for years, and I've thought about, and I always kind of considered it in the paranormal, supernatural spirit realm. But then, upon listening to more and more encounters, it looks like it is something of its own, something truly on its own legs that doesn't have a whole lot to do with what we would perceive as a ghost or a spirit. But these are something kind of in their own boat. One of the reasons that it really started speaking to me was that I spoke briefly, I think the first show I had with you, about my encounter on my own in my own living space with that, and I can recount that if that helps and give some kind of context as well.
Indeed, and for that, even now, I mean, and not to go back to your encounter because you've discussed it, but in terms of course, what you did see, I mean, for you, this is what you wanted to go out and do, is prohibit and to basically be investigated on the whole idea of the paranormal following your encounter. How is it that, in a sense, when you're investigating this stuff, like, what is it would you, not what you're looking out for, but like, what are the things in investigating this? Like, do you have a form of protection? Do you have a form of a safety measure? Often, and many people, when they do this type of investigation, this research, they often do prayers. They often sage some sort of spiritual aspects. I've often done some saging, a couple prayers there and there with a few researchers. How do you go about it?
I am a fairly new practitioner of Wicca and witchcraft. I have really no firm basis of belief system. I'm just more of figuring out as I go along. But I do definitely take the precautionary saging and things of that. And I've noticed that every once in a while, if I do have something odd occur, when I do burn the sage, it does seem to calm things down, and I really don't have much of anything after that point. Though, when you do encounter something, who's to say when the next thing should or shouldn't happen? But yeah, that's definitely been part of my journey recently, was introducing myself into the Wicca culture and trying to learn what I can, and seeing all the overlapping that has with that.
Now, in the witchcraft, as you're starting out, I mean, how is it necessarily? How do you normally go about it? Are there things you're able to share, or are there things that are like kind of kept hidden under the belief of religious aspect, unless you're like firm with it?
Being as new to it as I am, I've never really considered myself or really aspired to be a religious type person, and that's absolutely to each their own. Though it was interesting that Wicca kind of spoke to me, because it seems to me very much a self-belief, and very much something that you can turn and shape your own destiny, your own path. It's very hands-on. It's very much everything that you put into it is what you get out of it. And that's something that I've always really connected with, the ideology, and just the vast amount of history there is in the subjects really kind of resonate definitely with me personally, and then with my own beliefs as it was.
Now, starting out also with this, it's also helped with you in your research because it's also helped in giving you a bit of an intelligence value to it. Not saying in the sense that, intelligence-wise needs to be a factor, but like a sense of like, the more you study in this value of practice, the more are you getting a better understanding of the paranormal, of what you've encountered and what others have seen, or is it kind of just like where you are studying it and using it almost as like a tool for your research?
It's very much my own personal path, but I have found that there's a lot of synchronicity as far as the beliefs, the structure, the energies that you call upon and into and delve into. It's just a lot of found whatever you find, and as much as you dig into it, you're going to find that there's a lot to do with ancestral spirits and things that everything has energy, everything has purpose, everything has a beginning, middle, and an end, and when it does, it sometimes continues. So one of the beautiful things about it is how much it puts emphasis on where you came from and your ancestors, and especially relatives that have passed away. You get a continual relationship with them because you honor them, because you do things that remind you of them every day. You carry around items, but not necessarily something that they owned, but something that you put the meaning into. And that for me has been a really, really strong point, which has kept me zeroed in on this subject specifically.
No, that's a good way of looking at it too. And I mean, for everybody has a right for their beliefs and where they want to go about it. But of course, even with talking paranormal wise, you have come up with you've had some interesting cases there and there pop up in reference to your own investigations. What have you collected in the last duration since we've spoken on encounters? You had told me something that was pretty interesting. Would you be able to share with all that?
I can get a little bit detailed into it. I really would like to have the actual. They're very interested. The couple of friends that actually experienced this event, I can definitely give you the basis of what occurred to them, but I don't want to get too detailed as far as the matter. But I could say, and I sent you a drawing that I did of the entity, but we'll get there. This occurred, I can't put a date on it, over a year ago, I believe. Actually, really not too far away, a couple blocks down from where I currently reside. But my friend and their partner, they had been experiencing a lot of strange events at their property. Weird things as far as even finding quote-unquote gifts or stones arranged in bizarre areas. It's a very deep... a lot has happened to them in a very short amount of time, it seems, and I'm sure they would love to expound on it. But basically, this culminated in an event that a partner, his partner, had saw what she perceived as a shadow person. Apart, but what set this apart from many other encounters of shadow people is that it had what it appeared to be 3 horns coming from its what they think a head. And this then resulted in them violently convulsing, falling to the floor, and then suddenly blacking out. This all occurs at the same point that their partner, every time they're witnessing this occur, and it just seemed to them that they were having a seizure or something worse. When they came to, they explained they were very, out of it, but still sure of what they saw, and this was something that they perceived to be, and the more that they looked into it and then relayed this to me, lines up with the definition of what a shadow person does or can do.
So this shadow person that they had seen on this property had some sort of ability, in a sense, of what they were seeing, that had drawn them to some sort of form of epilepsy, is what you're saying.
I'm probably not documented, or rather diagnosed, but something that what we would perceive it just a frenzy, something that like a waking dream almost, just something that seemed like losing control of oneself and just being engrossed in, I believe really what it was a waking dream, because they remember recounting an event that they were reliving a horrible experience, or rather experiencing, not reliving, but the death of their family and things, just the darkest depravity that one can experience. And this all occurred in this very short amount of time. And when they came to, they were just, just the worst of the worst as far as emotions go. And that leads me to my theory and a lot of other encounters of the shadow people, that they do bring on a negativity and a negative emotion, and something that draws them to certain people is just our ability to reach those emotional extremes.
That's a piece of work, though, especially, and I think for when those who've had these occurrences, I've often spoken to people multiple times there and there about when they've had what appear to have been an awakening dream of sorts, and it feels, and the vibes and emotions, their bodies are so like cold. They wake up and they're like, well, what just happened? Or just in general, their mindsets are just so complex because they can't explain what they've seen. In this situation, it sounds just about close to the same thing. I couldn't imagine, though, I mean, for what this entity is or whatever on this property, have they, by any chance, have seen anything rather unusual prior to this occurrence?
As far as actual seeing of things, I'm not sure. I know that they've had many strange events happen on that property. Even as far as like what I said, the moving around of things, the dog barking at nothing on the wall. Things, your classic textbook, what seems like a haunted house situation, but then when things culminate into the actual apparition revealing itself, that's a whole other level at that point.
Have they, by any chance, I mean, I know that there's a few things you can't really go into, or there's not a lot of details in a sense because of what's going on, but have they given their own perspective, at least a little bit, on their own view? Like, do they themselves feel like they're comfortable at home with this, or do they feel like they should be worried? I mean, what is their overall reaction to this?
Well, they did move, so that though I understand it's still a family member lives there currently, so they can still go back to the property, which has led me to the proposition of maybe orchestrating some sort of an investigation type evening, if that was at all possible. That's still very much in the planning stages. But yeah, I know that it's not something that they ever wanted to experience again. It's definitely not a pleasant experience, and which really does set itself apart from a lot of the other a lot of paranormal interactions and encounters. When something does truly terrify you and make it just such an unpleasant experience that it isn't something that you do seek out.
I agree, and I think shadow people are one of those examples you never want to cross with, and I think in many cases, I mean, often shadow person will showcase itself for whatever specific purpose, especially in the sense of, like, many of the cases, at least from what I've seen, and a few that have told me, it felt like it didn't want them there. It felt there was an unwanted presence. And often there have been cases afterwards where some have seen shadow people, some have been attacked, some have often had scratches on the back of their neck or on their arms. And it's one of those cases where I think for dealing with such a mysterious entity, it's unexplainable. For you to go and do an investigation there, would you consider doing a solo investigation, or would you consider like doing an investigation that would be more of a research team that'd be going out and just looking at certain hotspots? I know that this is something that you have at the back of your head. It's just like a sort of a prelude, or even something that you may think about. But in the sense of investigating such a case, I mean, the fascination of shadow people, though, would you yourself want to do a full-on investigation around the perimeter, backstory, everything on such place?
I would, absolutely. Interestingly enough, these same individuals are very interested in organizing something of a local investigation squad, if it were, to look into dogman encounters as well that we have experienced in the areas. And that was something that we're even planning on doing as soon as this weekend, but that the snow has really kind of put a pin in a lot of the outside activity. But we'll see. Maybe there's still room for that yet. But yeah, I would absolutely love to do something more in depth as far as that property goes, because I do have access to it still. And especially even my own property, the fact that I know that I've had experiences here, I am a little weary to try to kick up any dust, as so to speak, but definitely interested enough to give it a shot in under the right circumstance.
Indeed, and I think it's also good to go out and do those type of investigations, especially to also better your research on the end of it, on what you're looking at, if something were to showcase itself. But with even discussion of this place, I'm curious to know more about it. Charles, please keep me updated on it, because I'd love to know more in reference to what's going on this property. It sounds like they dealt with something that is truly of a strong energy, and it's there for a specific purpose, for whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And it's made it clear that there is a conversation. It wants to have a contact. So I only wonder how it is now with them having left for a couple months now. I'm wondering how that sits.
Have you been able to speak to the current guy in the house, the resident? Has, by any chance, he or she seen anything?
No, it's their mom. So I'll have to see if they have experienced anything lately. But yeah, no, that's definitely a good point with that, because it has been kind of far removed from any initial interactions.
Often, I think there's some cases where people will see spirits or demons or whatever, and then someone else won't really see it. I mean, in terms of a demon, everybody will have some sort of ounce of seeing it, but in terms of other people seeing it, I mean, I mean, maybe from what I've gathered, there've often been cases where a spirit will manifest itself to one person overall, as opposed to somebody else whom they might see but not necessarily attracted to in sense of manifestation. So, I mean, definitely keep me updated in the loop. I'd love to find out more about this property. It sounds pretty interesting, especially, and this is in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Right, yep.
Overall, with the paranormal and what you've been currently studying, what else has there been to it? Have you been looking up some other interesting topics? I know that there was something you mentioned earlier to me about these... You said, I know them as best as the shadow dog, or no, black dogs, but you said they're called shadow dogs.
I'm not sure if it's the same thing or just another manifestation of the shadow person, because in some other instances, one of the investigators that I've heard speak about the topic, they had even referenced the existence of these when they have interactions with the shadow people. In any of their iterations, they've even seen shadow spiders, or like these shadowy spiders that descend on them as they're sleeping or in the midst of it, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and that's what's probably the most bizarre part about it. They don't have a set visage. And yeah, the shadow dogs are something, and shadow cats no less. So they everything seems to have its own shadow. Maybe this is something to do with Peter Pan. I don't know. But this kind of actually led me to the concept of how these are very commonly associated with sleep paralysis and people that experience that, and in that that twilight between the sleep and awake, and when you do fully wake and you found that there is something in your room, or in some cases on top of you. The Nightmare, the painting, a Anglo-Swiss.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Henry Folsey, that's it. But it's an interesting painting. That's one that I think could be a depiction of a what someone would perceive as sleep paralysis of. In the old legends and the wives' tales of something coming in your room and sitting on your chest until you can't breathe. but the shadow people seem to be linked in interwoven with sleep paralysis.
That's pretty crazy because I've heard a case or two about somebody who had been awakened and they had this sleep paralysis, and when they were awake, felt like they were pinned to the bed, but there wasn't something on top of them, but it just felt they were aware, but they could not move or speak or anything at all. And they swore that they were not hallucinating. They literally woke up and they felt this negative energy, they felt this vibe. And shadow people, and I think even just in general people, I've spoken to even another guy who is so terrified of these paranormal occurrences that, and not to be goofy or not to make fun, but he definitely some people sleep with night lights, some people sleep or are just wide awake all night because they are just terrified of what's in their room during the evening, that these things that it's going to kill them, and in many cases, it's not to go on an edge, but some people believe that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that comes up a lot, and it's almost it's very unnerving to think that these not only can take up physical space and what is from what we perceive as a shadow to come into your physical realm and then interact with you as far as sitting on you or choking you or pushing you or anything like that, but people do definitely have physical interaction with these, and it's something that you would never assume would be possible for something that you would clarify as a shadow.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. And even looking up on some cases of sleep paralysis involving demons, there's one in particular. There was a woman, I don't know if you've heard of this, she was in her 50s, and she would fall asleep, and then she'd have a dream, and then she was unable to really move, and that in the sense her husband was coming into her room and was trying to attack her. That's kind of how the dream was going about, but she could not move or cry about it or anything. And she went on to state that this was like going on for like a long period of time. She couldn't even basically move at all or do anything, and eventually there was this idea that there was a demon or something generally evil that would incorporate that type of psychological ability that unfortunately would have her feel useless and weak in terms of this. I mean, how for sleep paralysis in your case, I mean, have you heard of that case? Have you, like, for one out there to hear something about that, I mean, how it's terrifying to think, especially when you do study like this, that this is happening for those out there who have this issue because of paranormal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real diagnosed condition, and it does happen to almost everyone. I'm sure everyone's experienced it at least once in their lives, and it's just the in between awake and sleep, and how your mind can be awake but your body is still very much asleep, and just a couple seconds between you're able to move it. I've definitely experienced it myself, and it's a horrible feeling. It does feel like you're suffocating. It feels like you can't move. But then when you put the guise of, was something doing this to me, over all of that, and you're like, well, I thought it was just a medical issue initially, but now it does put into question, how many times are people experiencing this because of something or worse?
You just reminded me of an interesting thing that happened to me a few years ago. I was asleep and I woke up, and I part of me thought I was in a dream, and I get up. I can't move, right? I can't move. I can't walk or anything like that. I try to make that attempt, and I can't even talk. And I feel like I'm still in a dream. And I guess it just dawned on me because I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, it sounds so similar to something that I had happened to me a while back, but also at the same time with sleep paralysis as a whole. And even though I've talked about it, the more discussion of it, the more I think back to that. So, I mean, the idea, and for those who aren't really familiar with it, who've never had it happen to you, it's almost like even Charles said, something's suffocating you. Something's like literally like trying to kill you. I can't imagine, though, the amount of people currently going through this paralysis issue. I mean, personally, I would be genuinely terrified to even like wake up. And those are times, man, where sometimes you wake up and then it's like, well, you can't wake up because something's going on, it's trying to kill you.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, because this was when the phenomena would occur, and when somebody was experiencing sleep paralysis for years. The ancients would probably associate it with a sleep demon, something that they are some entity that's coming in, and even in like Romanian folklore, the Strigoi will one of their facets would be that they will come into your house and sit on your chest and wait until they're given what they want, or otherwise they just suffocate you to death. That may or may not have much to do with sleeping. But there is a lot to it, and even as far as like the strange legends and the quirky superstition with, when one sneezes, how your soul is leaving your body, like, and that's why we say bless you. But that seems like a pretty far stretch. But then when you associate it with the idea that when somebody's experiencing a condition such as sleep paralysis and you can't get up, them equating that to a demon sitting on you or holding you down, then with this now hindsight of the shadow person phenomenon, you wonder how much of that has to do with one another. And there's a lot of people experiencing that very thing.
Do you think that there is a major study that's being conducted that's done properly in the paranormal fields that could easily help with this paralysis? Because it could definitely help those who have witnessed this and don't really have an answer to it, especially to those who probably don't have a good explanation to it and would feel embarrassed to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone is doing anything about it, and I'm not sure there's much we can do about it, to be honest. It seems like this is definitely a interdimensional problem, that whether or not we experience it, whether this has something to do with what happens in our minds when we do sleep, if the person sleeping is manifesting this shadow entity on their own, in their own late psychic abilities, are manifesting physically and then keeping them asleep, who knows? You can run concepts on this all day, but I feel that there is probably not enough. I think people just use medication when they experience this sort of thing, and there may be something that has nothing to do with their physiology.
It's interesting, to say the least, because when people take a look into the study of this stuff and they try to they get a good idea on what this is, the whole thing is that with paralysis and all of these other things, there's definitely a reason behind it. We don't necessarily know, and as you said, nothing we can do. And one of the other things, it might be a bit goofy for a lot of the people, but really I ask this question because, Charles, you yourself have had an experience, and you know people who've had experiences, but why do you think these entities, why do you think these spirits, they come into our world and let us see them?
Well, I think that there may be something to do with they have a symbiotic relationship with the living. And if it is something to do with these are the spirits of the deceased, if these are things that have never been human, if this is something that's walking into our world, the only interaction they have is through us, and perhaps, and this will be a very strong theory, but purely a theory, but based on what I've been learning and looking into these things, they want to invoke something from those that witness it, whether it is presenting themselves in such a terrifying manner, 3 sizes larger than an average human being. There's these massive shadows that appear that somebody sees them hulking visage coming at them in their home. And it seems that the goal is to invoke something, and invoke a fear, invoke a dread, something that people can create in us and then release our own negative energy. And then these things take that, and that gives them enough to carry on, or they got what they wanted out of us and now they're all right, or they have to leave, or perhaps when they show themselves from whatever terrestrial plane they have existed in, they come into ours, and the only way they can get back is by manifesting the negative energy, and they can't do that on their own, so they have to take ours. Perhaps.
That's a very good way of looking at it, and I think, we don't have a good explanation on the energies that come into our field or our world. In a sense, especially for those who are brand new to it and don't have a good insight or have good views because of how they may see it, or they don't really have an encounter. Everyone's different with it. But one thing I also wanted to go ahead and ask was also, even though that's a pretty good theory too. I think a lot of people should take good notes on that. Why do you think, Charles, in a sense, maybe this will go about with what you had just said, but when you encountered what you encountered, why do you think it chose you? Do you think that there was something that you may have done, or there was something about you that may have drawn the fascination of such entity? I mean, do you have an idea on why this entity chose to have it manifest in front of you the way it did? Or do you think it has something to do with just the way they just simply go about and the energy fields in such places?
Yes, I do wonder if there is more of a strategy to it, and that they do choose their victims more specifically. Because, like I'd said, and when I had that encounter, it was the anniversary of my grandfather who passed away 2 years ago. It was his birthday the night before. So at that point in time, I had kind of sat with it and was comfortable with the idea that, oh, that was him saying hi. That was him just saying hi to me. But then taking into what I know now, I now kind of see that as that probably was actually just a shadow person. It had nothing to do with my familiar ties. So it does lead me to believe that perhaps because of the amount of depression that had created in my life upon the anniversary of his birthday, and that me kind of rethinking that and then having really sat with the whole, the grief and the loss, perhaps that's what drew it to me. Perhaps that's exactly why I experienced it when I did.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That truly does. I mean, I also think, too, when negative energy gets bundled in somebody, there are certain things that we set off. It's like sensors. We go ahead and we launch these thoughts, and the end result of those thoughts, we draw in things that we can't explain, and they come in, and for whatever reason, they choose us. They choose to do whatever they want. I've heard cases of people who've had bad luck and negative thoughts all their life. They've never had a single paranormal encounter. People who've had that could live a good life have had encounters like that before. So I guess it works both ways, but also, too, I've often heard cases of death being involved and how death could also apply. But you are certain that this shadow person at all wasn't the manifestation of a loved one.
Only now have I really started making that connection. That I'm initially, that's kind of, I was very comfortable with the idea that was, oh, okay, this was the manifestation of some energy left over from my grandfather, and he's just checking in with me. And I was comfortable with that, and that was something that I could really kind of gave me some solace. But then upon revisiting that and then really replaying it in my mind and thinking about it more, and then, juxtapositioning that with the other encounters that I've heard and seen, it just seems like this is a little more in that realm, that this seems to me to not necessarily be anything to do with my humanity, my human life, and just more about just a bizarre circumstance, just a bizarre thing passing through.
I agree with that, and that does make sense too, especially when you take a good dive into it. Now, this is kind of a bit of a hypothetical, but also too more along the lines of your own opinion drawn on not only, I guess you could say, your research, but also from other research. Do you think that there is enough research going into the whole idea of shadow people? Do you believe that there is that there is a lot of information that's being presented that can help benefit, and not only just in your case, but also the cases that you've showcased here tonight, as well as also other people's cases that we may or may not know about?
Well, what's really fascinating is that anytime I bring it up to anybody, it seems that although they're not always so keen on bringing it up, and maybe people don't think about it initially at the time, but it seems that everybody has had that. I thought I saw something at the corner of my eye, and I wasn't really sure, but it just looked like a shadow had passed by, or something like a dark thing flying through. Well, the idea that I feel like more people have had encounters with these than they even know, and it's definitely something that's just on the edge of our own perceptive reality. And I think it is kind of an unsung thing in the paranormal world right now. Though there are many groups, and I believe there's even one on Facebook right now that you can join about people sharing their own experiences. Invite only, I believe. But yeah, I don't think there's enough to be said about it, because honestly, I think it's definitely something that can delve into even more dark topics that people are even comfortable with doing just yet.
Agreed.
Sorry. But for those interested, there is a Facebook group with 6K strong members. Shadow people, sleep paralysis, Hat Man, incubus, succubus, that whole element, and you can join that group now if you ever have a encounter.
It's a good platform to also showcase and share and connect with others, very similar to our cryptid groups. There is a bit of a criticism when it comes to that of a shadow person. I guess also, too, there is a bit of a criticism in general when people are skeptical of that of paranormal. But I want to talk about the whole shadow person element first, because it's been our big topic tonight. Shadow people as a whole, I've heard of often some criticism being drawn at the idea that they are not in fact shadow manifestations, but in fact manifestations of something else, possibly just misidentified. I don't understand how one could be misidentified with a shadow if one is often looked at and sees one doing a different motion and somebody is trying to mess with them. I don't necessarily buy into that, especially if they're home alone. I've often heard cases, I've had a friend of mine see a shadow person similar to you, and they were home alone and they saw something do something completely freaky, and to make everything long story short, it was disturbing, but they didn't expect a family member to do such a thing. But how often do you hear, when you hear criticism about that about like, a shadow person's nothing more than the imagination of somebody else's or someone playing tricks? I mean, do you feel that also draws a bit of a line in terms of paranormal research, because people are seeing these things, especially if people are coming out of penitentiaries, coming out saying that they see these shadow people?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely regressive to the topic, and that it's a very easy thing to explain away. Like, yeah, I see shadows all the time. What are you talking about? It's like it's something that I think people are very easy to dismiss until you do have an encounter in a circumstance that you can't explain. And that even led me to a thought that if people are having the experiences in penitentiaries explicitly, that leads me more. That puts a lot more credence in the negative. They are drawn to negative emotions, negative places, and have a bit of a symbiotic relationship, and more of a, actually rather, a parasitic relationship with negativity.
There's an infamous photograph, and you probably know about it. It was taken in a West Virginia penitentiary, and it was the infamous Shadow Man photo, and it was seen on a couple of outlets, from Ghost Hunters to Ghost Adventures, and I think, I don't know, I know that they talked about this there and there, but have you seen that photograph at all?
I'm not sure I have.
Alright. Well, yeah, no, real quick. For those listening in right now, you will note that you cannot see what's going on screen, but I am sharing the screen with you right now, Charlie. This photograph. Have you seen it at all?
Yeah, I might have.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah.
I'll be honest though, man. I mean, this thing is This is a very popular one. I'm surprised you've never heard of it before.
More cut and dry. It looks like a virtual human, but purely in black. Especially with and this is your classic example of what people do see when they do, because it's not a dark dingy room. There are no other shadows to obscure it. It's just purely a void of color, of a void of light.
Right. And I also want to go on and say that when this person was leaving, this was a paranormal investigator from a sister company in the West Virginia state of paranormal research, had taken the famous Shadow Man photograph at this West Virginia State Penitentiary. And this thing, I mean, as you said, the light is, there's no other light, and I know you can see it because we're sharing screens, but for those listening in, you can't see it. You can see in the next image, you have what appears to be, this looks like the original image itself before it was enhanced and ingrained, but, there's no lights whatsoever coming from the side of where you see the shadow person. So the only light you're seeing is coming from the camera that just took the photograph. And I think when they broke down the footage, or at least they broke down the enhancement, they couldn't make out any other rendering because of how freaky it looked. It was too hard to make out because there's no other lights in that area. They tried so many things, from lighting techniques to even shutting down the entire side of the penitentiary to get light sources coming on, or at least get even use small little lamp lights or something similar. But I mean, you could even see in that image how dark it is, how that's no equivalence to how people who've seen shadow people before, how dark it looks.
Right. Yeah, it's striking just how it does stand apart from anything else in the picture.
But I wanted to also showcase to you, because you had also brought along some interesting pieces of footage. This is a ghost video of apparently somebody who had been attacked by something, what appears to be something. Charlie, you want to go into a little bit about this?
This has been circulating for quite a while. This, real or fake, the jury's out. But it seems to be a security camera footage of a man being all but accosted by this sudden shadow entity, and it's not as pure void black as the image was that we just looked at, but then juxtapositioning it, this does seem just a almost frameless image of a body shaking, and then it drags the guy down the hallway, which is something that shadows don't generally do.
Something that caught me off guard when I had taken a look at this too was that, especially around the part where it manifests itself, computer generated image technology could easily do that, but at the same time, the way it manifests itself, it feels like it came in with the object or the mass of the air within, or the atmosphere in a sense, and you could see it in the enhanced. It almost looks like it connects with him. It looks like it's actually walking towards him in a sense. Do you see what I'm talking about? If you go back, you can when we go back before he even approaches into the frame, after this frame, you could see something that it looks like, if you keep your eyes on it, it looks like it's coming towards him right before he bumps into it, and then just manifests itself purely, knocks it off the ground, then starts dragging him. Now, that's just my hypothetical analyzation on that necessary part of that footage, but I just thought that was pretty interesting. Now I've taken a double take at that. It kind of looks like it actually, in the enhanced, it does look... Exactly, and it knew exactly, and he wasn't paying attention, and it just starts to manifest itself towards him. I don't know, man. It's a very interesting piece of footage.
Yeah, definitely a good first step to take a look at what we're talking about here. And if there's any credence to this, we're not, but evidence, we're not sure, but definitely an example.
I want to go ahead and want to take a look at this next piece of footage. This was one that you also showcased. This was on TikTok, but you can see in this red circle there appears to be some sort of shadow person that walks across. Now, this has been played back in a replay there and there. This comes from another source of Disclose Screen, another good YouTube channel. This is, you can see that the shadow person running back, and then for whatever case, it's something. I mean, Charlie, what do you got to say on it?
It just runs right through the frame. And now the what does beg the question on this particular piece is the way that the camera is set. To if the intention was, hey, look at me, I'm on the counter, that's okay, sure. But most people would probably have put the phone or whatever camera a little bit closer, or not necessarily in that frame to see the doorway still. So think about it a little more specifically. Does seem a little strange that they would take the effort to make sure you can see the door frame so clearly and then have the image flow right through. But it's still, yet another example of what one might see. Not necessarily that this is a complete falsehood, if it isn't, but definitely something that would likely. I'm curious if we could see a little bit better on what the image really is, but more people saying more. Yep. Go to the comment section for clues. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Just taking a look back and viewing that, because, like you said, I mean, it appears in frame, and the fact that they would have the door like that, I mean, surely that's something. But also too, I mean, the light, the light isn't necessarily shining on the exterior of that other room. So you can't really make out a good shadow if there was even someone passing on by. Plus, the way the door is parallel, they'd have to be on the opposite end. Overall, though, that's still a pretty interesting piece of footage. I mean, personally, looking at those two pieces right there, I believe that there is something. There definitely is something that truly stands out in both pieces. What it is, I don't know. What I do know, however, is that if this was indeed something paranormal, and that I believe there could be something to it, that it is a piece of footage that should be analyzed some more. I truly think that there is something there in both pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like, whether or not it's a legitimate piece of footage, we won't know. But there are, I'm sure, countless and countless other examples of people catching what they perceive as this on their own. And I would definitely put it out to anybody to, take a look at that last video you took yourself, because you might not necessarily have noticed it the first way around.
Absolutely. There's probably many people too, man, that have taken pictures of things, videos of things, and they haven't even noticed half the things are in them are indeed something. Especially, name a good example. You got one in Quebec of not to get into cryptids, but there's people who, there's a guy in Quebec who got a photo of a dog, man. He didn't even realize it because it was on camera. When he got home, take a step back at it, and he was like, wow. The same thing with paranormal. People will take pictures of things. They'll take photographs of family portraits, and you'll see in the background a ghost or a shadow just standing in the back, just in the photo.
Yeah, nobody had any inkling and when it was being taken. And that's the same with like a lot of EVPs even too. Like, you don't hear it, you don't see it, but when you go back to review it, that's when you do.
Absolutely, man. Real quick, just So, looking back at everything, from your encounter, from what you have collected, from these individuals, and even taking a look at these footage, I mean, Charlie, I mean, personally, the everything that we've looked at here and discussed, I mean, what do you have any like drawn conclusion yet? Your opinion overall with paranormal, or do you, more importantly, you're still studying and you're still just trying to find the answers as is?
Definitely trying to find the answers, but I do have a few theories as far as what we're talking about.
Oh, please share, please share.
One of which I have a common theme that a lot of people we talk about extraterrestrials, we talk about demons and ghosts, and then it seems as though that there is a lot of overlap between all these things. And I think that there are cases of which a lot of these are the same thing. And shadow people has probably just been the newest incarnation, and probably nothing new about it, but we call it what we do now. There's been even some accounts that when somebody is experiencing an interaction with these things and they do reveal themselves in a little more physicality, that the topics of gray aliens is even reached, that they have revealed themselves to look more like what our classic image of a gray alien would appear to be. So that, to me, leads that there is a lot more to do with everything's connected. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from anything in the paranormal cryptid field. Everything is connected, more so than anybody gives time for.
That's a pretty good, interesting theory, the way you look at it, in terms of creationism, and of course in terms of where it comes from. I think that should be everything, like in general, not just cryptids, but especially for what we're talking about now, paranormal. It should be taken a look back at, and it should be taken a look at with that type of analyzation. And you also want to, when you do your type of research on it, you also want to, of course, deliver it in a sense that is not only just in the professional manner, but also one that makes a lot of sense to one. And in this case, I think a lot of people are, I wouldn't say misinformed, but I'd also say that I think the answers are right in front, or the answers are there. You just don't really have a good grip at it because of how much one can be taken aback at. But overall, Charles, I mean, that's a great overall theory about it. Do you have any other additional closing arguments or any advice you'd like to throw out there before we go ahead?
Beware the Hat Man, which is more or less the ringleader in the shadow person world. That when one does see the shadow people, they do see the Hat Man, the man in black wearing what is perceived as like a Zorro type hat. So the more you talk about these things, the more it can draw it to you. So definitely proceed with caution if this is your cup of tea.
I agree 100%. Well, hey, listen, you know what, Charles, it's always great having you on the show. It's always great speaking to you. I appreciate you taking an hour out of your time today to sit down and talk to me once more. And next time I have you on, another banger. Charles, it was great having you on the show. Thank you again. You have a fantastic evening.
Thank you. Great every time.
Always. You have a great night now.
You too.
It was very good to sit down with Charles. I've always been a big fan and a big enthusiast of his perspective, especially since we're not too far off in age, and also because I've always been curious to hear what he has to say. And that activity going on where he lives, I would love to find out more. And I would love to have him come back on the show and give us an update. I hope he goes well with his research and investigation, and maybe we'll find something else too. I mean, who knows? It's a very interesting topic, paranormal, and I've always wanted to explore it a whole lot, as well as also too those breakdowns, those videos. Let me know what you guys think of those videos. I'll leave some links in the description for you guys to take a look at, and credit goes to those content providers who were able to bring out that piece of imagery that was showcased. The first piece of evidence, or at least what I think is evidence of ghost activity, was pretty compelling to me. Like I said, I mean, I personally feel that there is something in that image. I feel that there is something there that manifests, evaporates, evolves, and attacks this individual on the security camera. As for the second piece of evidence, as even Charles pointed out about the whole lightning aspect of it, the ratio, and the fact that the door's open, I mean, if this was, of course, a hoax, it would be a beautiful written CGI hoax, no furthermore than that. But overall, folks, let me know what you guys think of those 2 pieces of footage. And overall, what you guys think of Charles tonight. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments section. If you guys would like to submit a report, if you guys would like to get in contact with me, you can reach me at thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. Folks, if you guys would like to also give your insight on certain topics, feel free to. That's why the email's out. Currently, right now, though, if you guys have sent me an email, if I haven't responded to it, I do strongly apologize. I've had some issues with my email, but I'm getting those fixed as we currently speak, so my email should be open and available Sunday, the 24th. So if you have sent me an email prior to the 22nd and I haven't responded to it, now you guys know why. So I strongly do apologize for that issue. As well, folks, I want to just take a couple of seconds and promote something here. As you guys may know, Sensei we've put up a fundraiser for him in efforts to help him with his equipment, as well as also to bring forth to come on to the show, since he wants to commit to this as a full-time job, which is very good. Unfortunately, though, Sensei's personal life job, his real life job at the time, he had to forfeit and withhold from because of some health and mental health problems and constraints that led to that situation. So now currently he's working at home. We're currently throwing up a GoFundMe for Sensei. If you guys can help us out, our goal is $500, and we need Sensei to get some editing software, a microphone, and some new equipment in terms, as well as also some field research equipment such as trail cams and whatnot. As always, guys, feel free, if you enjoyed this tonight's show, to leave a like and subscribe. My name is Chris Fringe. You're listening to The Venomous Fringe. You all have a fantastic evening wherever you're at.